Hello. It is Sunday again. How's it going, Aiden? So today, I'm going to start with a few slides, and then we'll get into the feedback. But I want to just touch base with some things that we mentioned in the past live streams, and some of the slides that I mentioned that I would actually bring up today. So we'll jump right into those. Um, and we talked a lot about keywords. So here's my here's a slide I made for class, which is just this sort of nebulous smattering of keywords that float around in my mind while I'm working, and each one sort of like springboards some sort of idea or thought or some element within the design that helps me hone in on a particular aspect that may need to be addressed, and again, how things relate to one another and how do they proportionally weave in between one another to create some sort of potential harmony. Um, but this isn't all the words, and we talked about passages and transitions, which are very important to me in terms of like creating movement and graceful movement and juxtapositions that flow. And I don't, there's movement on here in rhythm, but we don't have passages or transitions. And that's, you can see here on the bottom, the last time I updated this slide was 2017. Maybe I'll update it again. But for now, you just, again, get an idea. And there is some sort of method to this, like clarity, hierarchy, balance, focus. What is the focus? What's the narrative? That's going to tell us where to go with all this stuff. The animation, again, we talked about how that should influence that 2D static image that you're getting. Like, how do we make it breathe beyond that? The limited local color and value palettes we talked about. Like, are you unbiased about this? Can you look beyond like your own eyes and uh, empathize with who may be viewing it and see how they're going to feel about it? Contrast. And when we talk about contrast, that comes into like all of our visual components. Like, how do we utilize that beyond value? Because that's the thing that most people go to, at least younger artists. But contrast across all things. Um, but I'll throw this up on the Discord if anybody. I know it's just a jumble of words, but at least you can get an idea of like things that are sort of flowing through my mind as I'm trying to do this stuff, and it really does help to me. You gotta have like specific vocabularies with specific meanings, because like you're gonna find instructors like, and I think for years I talked about tonal value and how I in my mind I thought that meant like soft charcoal rendering with like, like Bambi. I can't remember if I mentioned this in the last stream, but like um, very soft renderings, like the Bambi backgrounds, opposed to uh, Alice in Wonderland, which are very hard edged and graphic. But well, that's what I thought of was tonal. But apparently, tone is just literally value. It's like, so I don't know what people were thinking. What I was saying, like tonal rendering, because tonal rendering meant gradients, like lots of gradients and lots of soft edges. But apparently, that's not what everybody was thinking. So through different instructors, I think we all know that we all have different vocabularies for things, and I think some of us are uh, using the wrong words for specific things. And hopefully, it'd be ideal if we all had the same terminology and the same definitions for those terminologies. Anyways, long-winded way of saying this is sort of a snapshot of my mind as I'm working. And then the next slide is something from my buddy Paul Richards. He works in video games for literally forever. Like, he did a Nomon workshop event, one of those Nomon workshop live events that I talked about in my very first introduction stream. And he did this whole presentation, Thumb Wars, and you can go to on his website, autodestruct.com. Let me zoom out a little bit. You can see the actual URL right here on the bottom, autodestruct.com, and you could read his whole write-up and like basically the whole presentation with all the slides. And it's hilarious because the slides are fairly small because of the day and age that they were made. Um, but this is sort of those transitions we were talking about, like really great examples of how you can create transitions to create movement and create some sort of feeling of engineering and in anatomy. Like difference between like just a very simple primitive pipe, but like how it does it actually attach in different ways to different um, areas. And then the skirting around for illustration. What do you see at the base of a tree? Blah, blah, blah. So I think this one is really helpful. Like even the head here, rather than going from a large neck to the skull, but like what's the transition meet or the smaller forms between two larger or mid-sized forms that create some sort of connection point. So this was one of my favorite examples of that kind of stuff. And then these are, oh, we're going backwards somehow. How did that work out? These are going to be some of those Street Fighter slides we were talking about. Just using rhythm lines to create strong graphics, and how do you marry graphic to uh, a graphic to form and let that shine through. And that's what I love the most about, like, why I think I love Capcom so much in the 90s, is that very strong, appealing graphic that they're marrying to form and structure and turning it in space in a way that just feels dynamic, even if it's a character standing there, like this guy here. Um, that you really feel the motion. So like, and also like when thinking about the abstraction of it, like the straight line, and so like I think there's ways of like, what are you utilizing, or like as you're looking at it and you're trying to parse it out, what the different components are. To me, like what's most important is this very straight up and down gesture that's flowing up, and it feels sort of larger than life. So like it's not so much always about the specificity of what the actual geometry, because there's a little bit of billowing out because there's a reality of the actual form of the pant. But for me, assessing this for class, it's like, well, the gesture, this is the compositional element, this is the visceral statement. So that's what we're trying to communicate here with the pink, as well as the green going in different directions. So like what's your, and this is what we talk about where we have like contrast. So like all of these pink and the verticals creating a very large statement. And then in contrast to that, on that upper third, you've got these angled going screen left gestures that are very dynamic, not very, but you know, relatively dynamic compared to a normal character. Um, and it's funny how long it took me to realize like this is what why I was loving the art from Japan so much, and why I was like so not as much into a lot of the Western stuff, because everything was a little bit more muddied and there wasn't like a solid structural graphic design that I like to grab onto, like with my characters, and maybe that just, I don't know, maybe that's why I like action figures so much. So you look at your whole collection and like there's a very strong iconic statement for each thing. There's nothing too subtle about it. Um, but with like I think Western fantasy, like for the most part, like things are always like fairly uniform, and the point was realism, and the graphic design wasn't always the strongest. At least that was my impression, whether that's the truth of it or not. And again, here's just highlighting graphic designs and uh, how is it as a 2D graphic, and where are the 3D volumetric forms turning in space that is falling within that graphic design. And then here using Riley method rhythms to organize a composition. How do you graft and like complicated anatomy onto a very simple graphic design, a 2D statement? So you're sort of organizing through these like these bands and ribbons, like that sort of flow between these elements to create some sort of unity. So that again, things aren't oddly juxtaposed. So like, because if he's got a ton of muscles, you can get like a sense of like, in a less accomplished artist, like maybe those forms would start to fall apart from one another and they wouldn't relate as much as they would to a solid structural base. So again, this isn't like a literal anatomy, but it's a method of simplifying and gaining a strong graphic design as you're trying to breathe reality and the anatomy into it. And the same thing here, just more versions of that. And again, if you're taking really great figure drawing classes, like not all figure drawing classes are created equal, so you have to like seek out the best you can. And there's lots of these resources online, so you can find the stuff if you can't afford to take those classes. But that's where all this is really coming from, and just more versions of that. How do you utilize those abstractions? We talked a lot about that last week. Is like we always flip our mindset, and when the daunting reality of it, like all this complicated anatomy turning in space and the form, but if you can really see what they're seeing, and how to really step back if you need to make adjustments, go back to the simpler part, and then graft the hard part onto that. So that's all the slides I wanted to go over today before we got into Aiden's neato little characters. And he's got three characters we're going to be talking about, so like a cast of characters. Um, Main character, second oldest, compassionate, strong-hearted, responsible, overthinker, doubts himself, no kill rule, like OG Batman. Tries to see the potential of good in everybody. Second character is the oldest, unbothered, more dangerous, soldier-like, willing to do whatever you get to get the job done, willing to kill if it means stopping the villains from hurting more people. And the third character is the youngest, slightly reckless, cocky, thinks being a hero is the coolest thing ever. Believes that some bad guys should die even if it means less death, or if it means less death. And they're a group of three teens, young adults, aim to improve their community through fighting crime, essentially becoming their universe's first ever true vigilantes, super vigilantes, I'm assuming. Due to the lack of superheroes, they have no real blueprint and instead must set the examples for future heroes. Super cool, man. So I'm gonna flip through this before we start actually doing any drawing. Hey, Alejandro. These are our three cast characters. The second oldest, the oldest, I'm assuming, and then the youngest on the right. I think it would help if you had something like this because your story seems like it's fairly developed. Like just put their names on here because I'd like to connect a little bit further. Because truth be told, before I had actually sat down and digested this stuff, I thought it was versions of the same character. So like you're just giving options for like how we can arrive at like the main character. I didn't realize it was a Band of Brothers until I had read the brief, and I shouldn't need the brief to understand that. Cool. Can you type in the chat like what you think uh this hoodie what this hoodie is? Like is it sort of like Blade Runner where they had that clear clothing? Is it just like kind of a cool future thing, or does it have an actual like techie function to it? These are fun sketches. Just to utilize all the time we have here, and we're going to try to keep it a little bit tighter. We went 3 hours last week, hopefully half the time this time. I'm just going to say everything, whether it sounds petty or not. Something like this, like let's put the numbering down away from it, because I really want to connect with the drawings themselves. So we'll put the numbering down towards the base. And also, I don't know if it's just a mistake, but the two being so far over towards this guy, like we just need that to be down more central to that character. Like this is a pretty nice spacing. And then my other first impressions, because I love to go with my first knee-jerk reaction, like how will anybody have a first knee-jerk reaction if they're watching a trailer for whatever this is for, was that they look fairly villainous. And I think I know why, because I know that you love Spider-Verse, and I know you like the Prowler, the Miles Morales Prowler. So I think that's where some of this influence is coming from. So if that's the case, like they see, like based off the brief, I was getting it, like that's our go-to, like that's the thing that can't change. If yes, it can change, but I'm saying like if that's somebody gave that to us and we have to work with it, I'm not seeing some of that the goodness. I'm seeing a little bit more villainous. So and that's the thing we just want to take catalog of and say, okay, this is just the first clay that we put on the armature. How do I feel about it? Oh, maybe I went a little bit overboard with some of the villainous qualities of it, because maybe I do want like a certain Batman scariness to them, but there should also be like an aspirational, like a goodness that comes across too. So if we can call out, we want scary, but we want hero in there, like a little kid like thinks they're cool, like a version of that where like uh, we have those two opposing components. Then what's the proportional ratio between those? Like how can we divvy that up? Um, so and that could come through performance again. It's like we talked about a wolf going from very cute and cuddly, getting on its back and like you let you scratch your belly if they're at like a wolf retreat, but you cross them wrong and then like they growl and they look dangerous and they look scary as all hell. So is there a way that the hood comes up once they go into battle mode and they want to frighten their enemies, or the people that are harming others? Then is that when it changes a little bit? But once everything dies down, battle stops, they take a breath, one thing unfurls or something, and then they're back to their like aspirational, like heroic version of that, of who they are, like who they are in their heart versus who they are using or what they're using theatrically to intimidate. You got a reference here. Cool. That's pretty rad. Cool. I'm gonna jump right into it. There's a lot of stuff to go over here, and I'm gonna try to open up all of these images. But we'll start with this, and we'll start talking about like if this is what you're presented, then like as an art director, like how should I start to give the feedback based off of what I know about the narrative and the story. Just gonna check the chat real quick. Okay, the hoodie is not see-through, it's just for the turnaround. Okay. And I believe I fixed all my macros, so we might be zooming through Photoshop today. Um, Aiden, would you say that these would be like your final, roughly final versions that you want to present for feedback? Like if you're on a project, this is the sort of final illustration, minus some rendering that you could obviously do. Yeah, Windows Ink has finally been handled for now. I'm sure it will come back and do something delightful to our time. I forget that there's like a minute delay on this, so I'm probably not going to get the answer in time. I will just take this as this is like the first image, so it is like the presentation designs, and then the rest are sort of the supplemental. Like here's how I got here. I love the skull shapes and the hair shapes. So like that's the first thing that stands out that I find appealing and interesting from there. And also the body types, the physiques are cool. I think we could probably push the differences a little bit more here between these two. Like I probably want to make him a little bit more lengthy or sort of split the difference. So like if let's say that he's a mix between these two, so maybe he's the more lengthy one, and like one thing that we like to talk a lot about in class is like the fit of the costume. So what is that's what's really important to know the physique and the mannequin of the character underneath so that you can play with the graphic design of how he's within that costume, because there'd be one of these guys a little bit more built, so maybe he's a little more form fitting. The other, it's a little bit more average. Let's say this is the average one. Maybe this one is like a little bit more snug. Like we can bulk up his arms, bulk up his pecs, but maybe like that's when from the lats into the obliques, things get very slender. So like he's got a contrast of like 2/3 mostly slender to a third bulky in that upper third, and then he's fairly slender overall, maybe not the widest shoulders, and then you get this kind of cool, but he's swift, he's super fast, and he knows if he gets hit, he's probably gonna take it harder than all the rest. But that's where we can have fun with that. Like you can tell the story through that graphic design of the lack of strength in compared to his brothers in terms of his frame, his physical frame. But that gives us a cool, if he has that swiftness, you've already got the big hair, and that could sort of be an interesting thing in how that animates and bounces as he moves, and then play up that as well with the billowy nature of the costume. So if it's falling off of him, and he could still be heroic, like you still throw back the shoulders, but the graphic design will be sort of like we'll close that gap. So here you've got sort of like these sharp triangles, and this is like this elongated triangle. So like play with the positive and negative to tell the story as well. And then this is the sort of billowy version of that, where like maybe they all have the same size shirt, like it's the exact same shirt they're wearing it, but how does it all working on it or fitting to them? And again, think of it like a business suit. How like they always say like somebody in a suit or a tux is always going to look like the best versions of themselves, in the way that the shoulders are meant to like create a heroic V and to like sort of present you in the most elegant light. So how do we use all the fit of clothing in general in all ways to create some sort of narrative statement that's kind of fun and cool, but also plays through the performance, which is based off of who the character is and what their physical attributes are. And you already have that going on here in terms of like there is some interesting shape contrast, but it's a variation on a theme, and we can push the variety even further. So right now you've got this sort of, let's say this like sort of an oval deltoid going down here, whether that's the size of his deltoid or just what's being inferred through the way you drew the costume. Like this feels like his actual strong deltoid, but it's more squat. And then this one feels a little bit boxier. So there's versions there, but I feel like that's most of the variety we're getting. And like he's a little bit more horizontal. He's just a slight lesser version of that. And then this is like just a little bit of a V. And with the style that I know you're going for, let's push that further. Let's do the Norman Rockwell thing. We're caricaturing all of the subtleties even further. So let's not be subtle with this stuff. And that's to say that now I can go here. You can see like because of how I was playing with pushing his physical frame in contrast to the others even further, and then letting that inform how the costume will fall on that frame based off of as the animation as well. And the reason was because I wanted something to accent his fast, quick movements, and a billowy shirt is just going to give us really awesome movement through space. So he's like, when he's jumping and running, you can see that thing flapping or flowing as he's like putting his foot kicked out. Like he's like jumping off some like rooftop thing. You can see that shirt and the arm thing sort of billowing. It's not the most legible little sketch, but hopefully you get the idea. Still trying to manage my time on the stream. Like, how fast can I do things? So from here, and I am thinking, and what usually too, like when you don't know what that narrative thing should be, this is again where you go back to and flip your mindset to that abstraction, because here I kind of want to push a little bit of a swoop up, but this gets a little bit boxy. So we're going from like sort of this shape to a box to another like a like strong base shape. So like it feels strong but differently. Like there's a strong base, but there's like an uplifting nature to his overall gesture. So we're getting this flow that's moving upward, and I'd probably want to accent that as well with and I don't know if that means we'd want to. Oh, uh-oh, interesting. My macros are betraying me. Make his head a little bit smaller, and maybe that'll allow me to move his head up a bit, because that's a gesture that I want to accent is the upward motion. Because I want to get a sense that through the abstraction that he's light on his feet. So I want to stretch his neck out a bit, and then that's going to also be an interesting way to, like, this negative space then helps showcase the focal point of the head in general. And maybe again, because it's a little bit larger on him, we can start to like push the fit of the collar, so it's drooping a bit, and even that is giving some sort of like vertical statement. Here I'm using anchor points to sort of indicate like the physique. So I want to get like have a few clear areas where I'm trying to indicate the mannequin underneath. And this is where, like, if you don't have these things, those anchor points, where the design can start to feel a little bit 2D, and like you're form and volume fall apart. So anywhere I can go in there to show that there's an understructure, what's solid, what's like when the clothing is padding against um, the skin, that's when I can send a solid or create a solid structure and turn that in space. But like as it gets into the billowy nature of this stuff, this is where it could be a little bit more organic and flowing because it's not describing structure so much, or at least accenting the structure of the base mannequin, and then a little bit of his on his shoulders to indicate the underneath or the understructure of the muscles. And the rib cage kind of gets lost in here. Like we don't really know where his lats or his pelvis is because of the billowy nature and the bagginess of all this down here. But we really want to pay attention to the under mannequin. Whoopsie daisy. And make a new layer. So I'm gonna push this with the lengthiness of him, so like things are pulling, they're not billowing as much because of, say, his frame, or sorry, the length, how tall he is. I'm gonna bring down his delts just a little bit too, so you get a sense that like he's like a hard bruising boxer. There's a lot of volume here, and this all gets pulled in. And so there's that rule of thumb of simple versus complex or straight versus curves. And this is a good example of where like from side to side, is your detailing different enough to create movement or flow or a strong graphic design from afar, right? To make a memorable character. And I know some materials will be the way they are, but as a base abstraction that we're going to graph more thoughtfully graph those details on, we want to start with something that's very strong and striking from afar, before we get into the smaller noodly bits. So I'm thinking like as a general rule of thumb, I want to push the vertical nature of this even further and make a stronger billowy statement on the side. And then as I add any more details, I might again use it as a transition zone. So somewhere down here, where I'm going from the cuff to the interior of the sleeve, start putting more of those in a concentrated area, and then let there be a zone of a more mid-sized shape that flows upward from that. So we get detail, but maybe because we know that he's taller, so he's stretching the shirt more as well. And that's where we get the simple versus more complex over here. And then we get the transition that we've been talking about from zone to zone. And shrinking his head makes me want to bring out this hair a little bit more. So like maybe the hair size is good, but I just want to shrink his face. And this is actually kind of cool, this little tiny statement. So like how do you create something iconic? Like, and it could be like he just has this weird part in his hair, and for some reason this sort of like little alfalfa thing from Little Rascals, black and white kids show, or comedy show. That could be that one little thing that has a bounce to it, but also again, it's an iconic thing from afar that you'll always notice him. So even if he has like a very similar silhouette, for the most part, we can have that one little hero element within the textures itself. So this is where I'm saying like, don't let it be too subtle. Have a strong graphic overall, but then let's make a statement within that graphic. And that's just me riffing off of the clay that you threw on the armature and then reassessing it. Like, and that was like, I feel like that's a happy accident that gave us something that we wouldn't have thought of necessarily. And if you're getting into like even more cartoony stuff, and like this, this is stupid, but if he's the bomb guy, in the explosive guy. Like that's the literal fuse on the cartoonish bomb. But again, that would like that's all like how cartoony. What's the the overall tone of the show in general? How goofy should it get versus how like wink wink subtle it should be. And again, that was like even me thinking that was just a happy accident based off of what you already did in trying to make it more of a statement. Uh, and then, so aside from like the variety between the cast and playing those shapes based off of how we want to create more iconic variety, um, as we're presenting like this, still think about the Capcom Z depth. Think about them, even if they're standing with their feet literally parallel to one another, they're not going back and forth. I still want to see a flow. So, and this is where it comes down to like, don't be afraid to draw your characters many times and know that the character that the drawing that you're using to get an approval is not necessarily the drawing that's going to be used to be the thing that gets built. And sometimes it is, because like on What If, like we would do like one drawing plus a 3D model and then like maybe detail the 3D maquette before sending it off to the vendor. Um, but depending on the scenario of the project and the scope and the amount of resources and time you have to do things, like ideally you should be able to say everything you want in one drawing, but don't be afraid to that doesn't necessarily always have to be the case. That's to say that like, is this something like a T-pose thing that modelers should be like sort of one-to-one with, or can we play it up even further where I go in here and I want to like almost, let's say like, where's our horizon line? So as we start to think about our character, if we're not thinking about it coming towards us and away from us, maybe we could, at least in terms of like how their legs are positioned, there can be that inference of like, or a lens issue. Like if it's like a very dynamic, cool project, then we can play with the lens of the camera to describe that. So are we looking up at their head a little bit more? It's like if the horizon line was here, so like this is us looking up at these ellipses, and then it gets flat around there, and then we start to look down so that things almost flow like they're bowing. Oops. On that upper third, it starts to bow towards the viewer and then away from us as it gets to the head and the feet. So like the geometry that we're designing, like I mean like the actual physical tangible thing is like is one part of the component. So much of what we'll actually get in approval is literally how you're presenting it, how you're dishing it out to them, and having a visceral reaction from whoever is making an approval or not. Another good example of how your physical frame will, this is like the extreme version of that, will influence like something specific and interesting about the character or their performance, is the acrobat guy from Coraline, I believe, where like I think one of his legs is shorter than another. And you may not clock it, like especially when he's flipping around, but it's like as he gets on the ground, you can see he's sort of kind of like have a wiggle to his walk. Um, and that's, again, that's just like a very clear version of how your physical makeup is going to create like how you're actually interacting with the world. But even with somebody average, like how can we infer something interesting about how they might move? What's interesting about them? Um, there's I'll post this up as well, but there's a slide somebody put up where they call it avoid the ladder. That's just another really great way of an example of how to create variety in proportional hierarchy for a strong read, but also just a more interesting design, base design, without overcomplicating. You could just play with proportions. And anytime that we're evenly separating things to a degree, that's where, again, you're not creating a strong enough movement and you're not creating a strong enough graphic design. So let me just pull up his hair a little bit. So from afar, just like the other guy, it's going to make him a little bit more striking, and it's going to become more of a frame for his eyes. So like basically I want to try to not let this and this, which is sort of the frame around his eyes, be too in conflict with one another. If I bring the proportion up a little bit more on the head, it surrounds it all. It gives it his overall basic frame a stronger statement, where like this is the dominant proportion or the broader, larger proportion, and then this is becoming more of an accent proportion, and the eyes become a little bit more important in terms of obviously the value contrast and the chroma contrast. So maybe we're going from large, medium, and then small. And again, everything is done with intent. So we're like literally building everything from scratch. So like if it's there, it should be there purposefully. Um, and I'm looking at the hairlines. And this is why it's really important to work your variations together. Don't do a drawing and then go do another drawing and perhaps like leave it up to chance whether there's enough clear variety and also purposeful variety in terms of how you're adjusting your graphic designs to tell a story in slightly different ways, but hitting that same mark of who the character is. But you can see here, his hairline is the same as his hairline. And at this point, there's no real reason for it. They may have the same physical hairline if you push his hair back up, but we're not playing with it. If we have a fairly simple head design, then let's play with everything that's available to us. So if he's swifter, maybe his hair gets a little bit windswept. So like there's this piece that sort of comes down. There's asymmetry to it, and there's more. We can give him more of a V movement. And again, that's the animation and the inferred movement through a static image based off of how we're tapering and creating motion through less static shape design. And that's the difference between a box and an upside down triangle. And all I'm doing here is trying to do an asymmetric upside down triangle to show that he's moving. He's like, as a static image, he's heroic. He should feel like he's in movement as he's standing there. And as a kid looks at him as a hero, he should feel larger than life and aspirational, not sort of just normal guy. Let's check the chat real quick. I think the same thing here. Just for the style, which I think I know what you're going for, I want to push more movement in a stronger graphic design. I know it's sort of like a paint like protective mask thing, like that's the vibe of it. And since these are all different already, and like maybe I don't know, do they garage kit bash all of their own gear? And if that's the case, like can this be a little bit bigger and stronger of a statement for him, and we can like pull out and thin this even further? Because again, I want to make sure that I'm being attentive to my negative space as much as I am to the positive space. So again, this is my through line. So I want this to be very thin. And maybe I need a little bit more negative space for his neck. And again, that comes down to like how many, like as you're getting through one zone to the next, is there visual, are there too many repeating elements that are closely layered together that aren't creating enough movement? And I want to accent his overall height and proportion design in his neck as well. So that's coming from needing a little bit more negative space here, but also wanting to push the consistency of his more elongated frame. So like they're fairly symmetrical. Maybe he's like a little bit asymmetrical in the hair. And again, the Norman Rockwell thing, or I call it the Norman Rockwell thing, but it's always like anytime I feel like I don't have enough of a strong statement, where like, and when we say like things can become too uniform, it's meant that like the silhouette, this flows very gracefully into this, and then this flows gracefully into this, then this flows gracefully into the bottom, and there's not enough ins and outs to create that graphic design that makes all the things that we love so great. So let's just utilize it. So what I'll do is come in here and make sure that I'm tapering in to get more depth, so the hair is flowing inward towards the mouth where he'll be talking, but also infer motion, right? So we're inferring motion this way, or inferring motion coming towards us. And then I'll have, and that flow could go, so sort of cut through here and then break. So you're getting a straight to a curve overlap, and then that juxtaposition creates a stronger graphic design where you're going from a clear, simple straight into a very sharp turn, but as it bows and convexes outward. And rather than just the circles with him, I think again to push like maybe like so he's like sort of like the lead of Gotcha Man, where like that's his body type, and he's like sort of the average heroic type. But I'm going to use everything I have within the details to create more motion. So rather than having, if we're looking at these little vents, maybe I'm going to turn that into a circle with a triangle. So again, there's more movement rather than something that's stopping the viewer. So if I push that, and that's just like to take this local color value of the darker, dark gray, and that starts to push that same movement backwards that I'm getting here as well. But also it's creating a flow that's now relating that to what's going on here on the eye mask area. Yeah, this brush is slowing me down, so I'm going to go back to this guy. It's like once I already have a design down and like all my value and color palettes, then I'm just moving shapes and reorienting and redesigning based off of the subtleties. And if I find myself like slowed down by even just a little bit of tape or opacity variety within the brush, then I'll just jump to something like this, which is very brutal and sculptural. Even that, yeah. So like, I want to, now that I know that I'm sort of establishing this family of rhythms going this way, like to create that motion and movement, then I want this to accent. So I'm not going to let this cut that movement. So I think what I'll do is push this back up like we had it, or you had it rather. I think this was feeling like too much of a statement because like obviously it's like sort of looks like a cat, but also it's creating this becomes a little bit too important. So I think what I'll do is I want the motion, so I'll just literally stop it. I'll just get rid of the detail here. Maybe as an actual form, it's just this soft curve for the most part with no real sculptural like shadow, light and shadow. And then I get back into here where it's a little bit of a sculptural light and shadow interaction, but that sharp edge stops here. I wonder if we should have a darker, just like one more component to our. I want something to contain the focus up here, and everything's like sort of like in terms of the value structure floating away into the body. So maybe the collar and the cuffs can have like a stronger containing element. And also it highlights a focus on the hand area in the head as well. You can see without that, let me turn it off real quick. It's all becoming too much of a mid-tone, but at least now like you're framing the head and you're also calling more attention to the hands, which are important areas. This is fairly subtle. I think we could punch this up quite a bit. Again, just not being subtle with our graphic design. Let that read from afar rather than turning into just a pure line. It actually could be interesting if, like, would it be weird if it was in a little bit further as well? But this is a lot of the trial and error that I would do through my layering and through my sculpting and resculpting, that you wouldn't necessarily see, like most people would never see, and you wouldn't see in the presentations. Like the discovery process is like gauging proportion. When is too far, and like when is it not far enough? Just showing variety for the sake of argument. Not that any of that is good. And adding this is similar to adding the darker value around the collar and the cuffs. Is like a containing element, but also an expansion of the graphic from afar. I think he sort of looks worried. I think maybe we want to be a little bit more determined. I want to try to bring in some of that strength back from the mask that you had. And again, the reason why I keep zooming out is I want to see him from afar, but also the relationship between the brothers. So like, what are the right now? This is sort of what we're working with him, and then he's sort of like this more diamond shape, and then he's this more like squat oval shape with these cool bug eyes. Again, so like in pure the most abstracted forms, what's their logo? Like, how can you distill it down into more iconic, simpler versions? So as I'm trying to fill out the realism or the details of the show's relative realism. I'm trying to gauge this as I'm doing that. I don't think I'm going to resolve this off the fly, this design of this mask here. But even then, like that still doesn't even matter compared to the narrative of the the contrast between the brothers here, and in the stylistic proportional overall statement. It's like whatever's in between doesn't matter as much as the feeling of those overall statements. How do I feel about them? Like, is it cool enough for the style that you're going for? Oh, you know what? Because I'm thinking like something's missing in here, and like I'm wondering, like, can we do like, is he listening? Can he be listening to music as he's fighting? It's like I'm not necessarily breaking. There's less motion there, and maybe I can play with the design of the earmuffs or the headphones um, to retain that sort of triangular movement I wanted. But I keep trying to come back to the strength you had in this, but while keeping the sort of triangular movement. Jesus. Oh, hey, Amelia. Shouldn't you be doing retakes? That was an inside joke. Was not trying to be mean to anybody. Oh yeah. So even here, like within this, having a break in between this pink, so it's not a consistent circle, that's going to help accent this motion that I want. I'm wondering if this guy should end up having, like if he's going to be the runner, that then I probably want to have some shin pads on him. So like it still could be like skin from the side in the back, but like from the front, maybe want to have some cool protective gear. He's a very youthful look to him. Um, but his arms they almost feel like they're giant muscular arms underneath that. So I was wondering if I could just bring down his shoulders a little bit more to make his physique have a little bit more motion in general. Especially if I'm pumping up this guy's beefy deltoids and chest, then I can bring him down again more to an average size. Like, so still strong and muscular, but not as wide. Um, and then with the shoes, this goes back to the Norman Rockwell thing. Have more fun with it. So from afar, like we should feel a little bit like I'm just pulling things out slightly. Everything's got a little bit more of a lip to it. You could have more fun with the how certain little areas within the silhouette you can play up the shoelaces here and there. And right now, like again, this feels a little average. Like it's almost like a normal shoe, and we can push it a little further. Taper this gesture in a little bit and then out. Again, like those corners, 1, 2, 3, proportionally, this being the longest, and the medium proportion, and this being the smaller proportion. Like that also just helps with, you've got it going on this side. I'll push the gesture even further like you have over here. And this is the interesting contrast, but these become like sort of the same but different. So can one be strapped up a little bit more? If since this guy's already the lengthy guy, can we give him like more higher boots to show that verticality of the character? So like protective, but have areas of movement. Movement as in like a more swift, simple vertical. Trying to want to integrate into the knee pads. So like maybe the boot could cut off here as it goes around, and then we get a connection transition point that goes into the knee pad, maybe a little bit of padding around that knee pad, and then this little area here and this little area here become little slivers of verticality rather than something that's squatter. You get a little bit more of a sliver triangle that keeps pushing the viewer up, like another little stair step of moving upward, being that we're pushing a vertical gesture with this character in general. So I want a little bit more visual interest within the silhouette, but I still want that same simplistic statement to read. So I'm trying to make sure that the silhouette that sandwiches that statement lets that detail not become too important, so that it still stays as like our eye moving swiftly through that area. Because you could see, like, if we were being ridiculous when we brought those silhouette pieces out, we're like, it becomes slower and it becomes too much visual weight in an area where we're supposed to skate across, especially for a swifter, taller brute character. Because for him, again, we're balancing proportion of swiftness within his physique versus strength in the upper third. And even here, this is like where I would play with the subtleties of like, do I want those straps to go a little bit higher so that even within this, there's a proportion? Because this is 50-50, right? We kept talking about like how to, let's always make sure we're pushing it more clearly towards one proportion or another. So now we have a little bit broader of a proportion down here. Oops. Sorry, here to here versus here to here. And this is 50. So you get 2/3 to 1/3, and this is 50-50 or half and half. And there's like specialized gear towards what they're doing. Like we talked about this guy being the swift runner. He's more evasive because if he gets hit, he's going to get clocked more harshly than these other guys. So I need to know more about what they're actually doing because I can't design stuff because I don't know what their function is individually. Um, so specialties are going to come in helpful. Like does he use explosives and he runs? What does he use? Is he just more of a brawler? And then and if he is like, right, if he's doing like the down and dirty knuckle, giving people knuckle sandwiches, um, is it too villainous to have spikes? So is that where I want to come in and give him more of like a brass knuckles thing where like maybe we just turn those 4 spikes into 3 broad pieces of like heavy metal or squares. So like he's doing damage, but he's not trying to kill somebody. And that already alone, like the composition of that, whether that's appropriate or not, but it's at least getting us towards like a narrative purpose, um, weighing who he is and like what kind of hero he is. I know I think this guy is the one that kills more than the others, but he's still the hero. Um, and then that graphic design, right? Like we have to take into account of how this is going to look across the street, right? In those far shots, and things can easily start to fall away. So like whatever the statement is of what his duty is, like how he functions, what his role is in terms of combat, should come across from afar as well as up close in terms of the details. So I glance at the chat real quick. Tend to play safe with my designs. Yeah, if you do tend to play safe, like just put a sticky note on your monitor or like literally write it in pen on your arm. Like just make a habit of like stepping back. It's like, okay, I did the drawing. Now this is the time to improve it. So I'm going to make a point to make a new layer, grab a very garish chromatic color and start to do this with your designs. Just reassess. Like you're going back to the thumbnailing phase over your thoughtfully drawn out drawing and not being too shy about pushing and pulling um, the silhouette in different ways to see how it feels, but also to get you in the habit because then you won't be doing that as much. You'll actually do it as you're going and you won't be playing it so safe. So what I was saying before, like I didn't know what else to do because I don't know what their role is. Like I need to know more about the story so I can actually put the appropriate costumes on here. So I'm just gonna add a little bit more padding up here. So like let's say that he goes in first and he's trying to protect his brother. So because he's a little hot-headed, perhaps maybe he needs a little bit more padding here or there. Um, I don't know because we probably don't want to put him padding head to toe, but like maybe just an inference here or there of some padding could be enough to get that across because like it's not all about like the level of stylization lets us get away with a little bit in terms of the theatrics of it. That there's more of a feeling than like the real world specific logic of it. think I want to bring his hips in a little bit as well. So this is the anchor point we're talking about, like what's bone, what's muscle, what's fabric, what's fat, fatty tissues, like sagging fat versus like more like fuller. Like what is the weight of the material? How is it influencing the silhouette? So, and you can see here, if I just add a little bit more of a contrast, like you get the kind of curvaceous quality of uh, the muscles and how that bows out, and then a little bit of straighter area for like tendons or areas of bone to contrast with that. You just use straight versus curve as like a quick shorthand in having it dip in as a clear change, like proportion change or shape change within the silhouette. Gives a bit of a idea of what might be going on underneath. So like if this is his pelvis area, and then like where his muscles lying and where his lats going. So like should I probably want to push his lats even further? So these two straight lines are inferring the hips, and then the lats can come out. So like maybe he's got fairly strong lats. So his arm's going to be pretty strong and lengthy, but he'll gain. So like as he moves in space, right? Because we have to think about how he's going to look, how that graphic design is going to change. Where did the little dot go? Oops. Just as an example. Well, that doesn't look good, does it? Let's bring that down. Like how broad is that lat versus the length, the actual length, strength of the bicep. It's like this. Can we pull that lat out even further? But when that arm swings down, it's sort of stunting uh, the negative space and that verticality we wanted. But that's sort of a casualty of we want him to feel very strong in his upper third. We want strong lats, we want strong deltoids and pectoralis and triceps and biceps. And towards the legs and towards his forearms, that's where things get a little bit more slender and feel more swift. So you go back to like um, the animation, like will feel a little bit swifter and more visceral, and like it's very hard hitting when you get to this very blocky hands and all that strength coming from that blocky upper third. Um, but as his arms are down, like you just get this big mass, and you do get a little bit of like some nice verticality here. But I think it was my intuition to maybe bring that up. But I was like, no, that's going to get stunted because the lats have to be important as he raises his arms. And just like the cuffs, I want to make these shins go away. So maybe he's not padded up right here, but I want this to feel like just the background statement. So like sort of this graphic is married to this graphic for the dark hair and this. So like from head to toe, you get a strong proportion of the shins, the bottom leg kind of shooting you up. But in terms of a macro graphic design, that black is sort of peppered throughout the design, but also it contains it, right? The hair and the collar is the top portion, and then the bottom legs are the lower containing element using the black. And there's no real engineering for the most part going on with what I'm doing here. I'm not really thinking about the specificity of like how um, these things would be built in 3D and how the actual engineering of how each like metal piece clasps into a rubber piece and all that. That doesn't really matter. I just need the style to be hit, and I need to an iconic graphic design, so I can let go of all of that daunting stuff, like we said, um, and just play with the logos. This might be too alien. Like the more I expand that design, but I'm trying to find a way to like to again expand his graphic because right now if you squint, it's still fairly muddied. So I don't know if we need to maybe having too much pink is making it feel too alien, and maybe I can just bring in some of that lighter metal to make a stronger graphic design. Say graphic design one more time. Use a darken layer just to adjust this value and keep my blacks line work. Yeah, I think that helps. Yeah, that's what we're missing. So now I can use this same metal and that can be the thing that marries these characters together. And if he is like like he's the Superman of the group, like maybe he's like the you know the most aspirational character. Then I want to lighten up some of his values, maybe more so than the other characters, to make him feel slightly less brooding. So like here, you're not connecting with these two because their eyes are literally gone. But I'm assuming we could still see this guy, um, depending on the lighting scenario. Like maybe like in action, this just goes flickers on and it goes pure, um, super bright, so you don't see his eyes. But it'd be kind of cool. I think most of the time you do actually see like him being sort of like a silly guy underneath there. And right now the knees are almost becoming a logo, like a just like a creepy alien or like a stylized skull. So what could we do that is appropriate? And again, if you are trying to balance like intimidation, then that idea might be good. But right now it's sort of the most interesting thing about the legs, but it's not interesting enough to be the center point, or the centerpiece. So we could think about the engineering of the knee pads and also think about the movement of the abstractions of the form of the shape and how that's going to make the character feel. Like we could start there before we think necessarily about like I mean I know it's difficult because we're sort of juggling all this stuff at once, but like if there is some sort of skull quality that we want to have, again proportionally how much. And this is me taking those eyes and putting them down even further, so like there's still a bit of a skullness to it, but it's in a more subtle realm because it's butting against the edge of transition. So you're having a strong detail on the edge and it's stair stepping you into the larger planes. So you're getting that narrative statement to a degree, like it's very subtle, very you can almost miss it, but it's more of like it's the impression and the feeling that you're trying to instill rather than like hitting them in the head with it. So like, again, and that's the point of the variety. So if we give like the director 3 or 4 versions of this character, we're playing with those subtleties, like how on the nose versus how more subtle than. The psychology of like doing streaming versus class feels just so strange because of the permanence of it. You feel like like mentally it's a little more daunting because it's gonna be there. So and then like you're thinking like, well, you ideally everything would be gold, but it's just not going to be. You're gonna ramble and hopefully do some cool drawing as you're trying to demonstrate and communicate the ideas, and hopefully not the most boring, dry way possible. And I'll do this throughout my cast lineup or my variations, where I'll go from one to the next and try to. Because here I'm trying to do a little more vertical, this is a little more squat, and then on this one, in the same way I would do like if I was designing their noses, I'd work them all together and I'd try different things out until I land on the one that I want. So here I'm trying to put that V down even lower. So you have a broader shape here, and let that V kind of lead the eye up. And then do I want anything in here? And like again, with a stylized animated show, there's going to be a variety of ways that rendering and look development will create visual interest. Like in Spider-Verse, you have all the texture fun that you can do, and that could be enough to say that. So we have to know when to hold back in this stage and know that other visual components are going to fill in the gaps and create some beauty without having to do too much within every component that we're working with. So it might be simple that or good that it's just a simple field. And what I do is like it's more about the silhouette. So you get this dark strap sort of budding out, and then this more broader field, which feels like right inviting because like we're balancing the tactical sort of urban spray paint aesthetic with the superhero aesthetic. And me, a broader plane is going to give a little bit of an inviting quality with those areas of rest here and there. And these again, this gets back to like almost a skull shape, whether for better or for worse. It's like on this hero guy, maybe I could get rid of that skull shape and think of something different completely. I can just get into some like more anime tech design for it. Oops. I'm using the scroll wheel to adjust my brush size so I get my thicks and thins fairly quickly in Photoshop. So in Procreate, I'll use a brush that just goes fat and super thin on pressure, but I don't, for some reason, I don't like the way that works in Photoshop. Just to sync up the graphic design, maybe add a little bit of that same metal, make the hands a little bit more important, but also like those, so that there's a stronger value pop in all those important areas. Because we talked about earlier, the initial run was like everything is very muted in a mid-tone. Not that this is super strong value contrast, but you can see if I just pump it up a little bit more. Pump up the value. It's going to make those hands a little more important. The top plane of those silver knuckles. Now that I'm looking at this from afar, because I'm assessing the sort of metal, it feels like it's in conflict with this a little bit too much. So maybe bring that back, let the pink and dark be important, and then maybe I'll put that there. So it's a transition. It highlights that triangle I wanted of motion, gets the strength of the silhouette from the original sketch that I liked. You can see how ugly this is, right? Because there's so many decisions that have to be made. So it's more of a level of thumbnailing detail for myself. It's still not presentable enough to present to somebody unless you have a certain rapport and relation, a history with whoever you're working for. But right now, like this is sort of what I want to be, so that I can continue to make strong graphic designs as it relates to narrative in a clear method that's gonna let me design and not get lost in the specificity of drawing or painting. Just I'm enjoying like just how this sort of like thick uh, collar works differently with each of the brothers. Like this one starts to feel like almost like a fat donut because it's just rolling over on itself. Because you just have a very skinny neck. Probably not thin enough. it probably get thin as thin as it would be in this area, but like as it gets into the base, like it probably gets a little bit thicker. So it just within the silhouette, it feels thin. But if you was to take the shirt off, like you would see, it gets pretty strong as it gets into the trapezius and into the collarbone. Oops. And I wanted his to be a little looser as well because he doesn't have a super thick neck as well. But I wanted to have like more of like um, a fashion design quality to how it lays on him, where you get a sense that it has a dynamic to it, and but also like a consistent ellipse. This would be the interior. But his neck is the thickest, so it's like butting up directly on the edge and then just plowing down or um, flowing down into his trapezius. And I'm making a lot of decisions on those small things, but I still think proportionally we could get into liquefy and like push things even further because it's nice that we made the mask fairly long, but his neck feels a little stunted at the moment. Not that it should feel very long, because I do want the strength in that. Um, but just for example, I want to bring it up a little bit further, just to test. Because again, like he can't keep getting taller and taller and taller, and then like not related, be related to his brothers anymore. Because even sometimes I'll do that, and then I'll just squish the whole character down a little bit, maybe like push him in to keep uh, some of the lengthiness. But at least then we start getting stronger ratios between all this stuff. So like from the side view, maybe within the neck, as you get into the mask, the hair. It's hilarious. I love it. Um, oh, that's kind of cool. I don't know how that would work, but I just wanted to demonstrate like it doesn't feel like very much movement. Maybe we can get like a sweet highlight on that to have more vertical movement here. But as he turns to the side, then you get a lot of verticality because his neck is so long. So you're not necessarily seeing it on a dead on straight view, but as he performs and he's moving quickly, then you get some motion. So again, don't be shy. Draw your characters a lot. Do these supplemental sketches to show how your character moves through space, and it's going to make whoever's again approving things are going to be a little bit more invested in what they're doing if they can see it more fully realized. And this thing doesn't have to be in a beautiful drawing, um, but we want to start to discover, like, get the mileage under our belt to have shorthands for nice little sketches that we can help fill out and communicate things to whoever we're working with, whoever our collaborators with. I like how this is almost like an Elvis hair. Uh, Silly. Um, So based off of what I've seen here, I was like, oh, I really like the proportion of those lenses. So I'm gonna go back to that same proportion now that I shrunk the head down a bit and made the hair bigger. So maybe it's the same size lenses, but you're not seeing as much because now the hair is overcoming some of it. So you're not getting that because I think one of the problems here is like it's a equal border around it for the most part, and now we can start to thin it out, and the border becomes tapered because the hair is overlapping it a bit. So it kind of goes away into that lost edge there, like you had it. And that would actually could be really cool, like, but that's kind of like a glowing thing, and then you got the brown or the black over that. It's sort of like scintillating as to infer translucency, or not translucency, but like the thinness of the hair overlapping that. What time is it? So that's oh my goodness. uh we're an hour and a half in already. Let me, let me jump to the other characters. I'll just save this out real quick. Or the other sketches rather. Man, it is impossible for me to do a timely feedback session. It's like usually when we have classes, like we've had classes go until 5 in the morning because it can be difficult to get to everybody. All right. Oh, okay, so that's where that hood's coming from. That was confusing. These are some pretty great gestures, like really fun stuff. I'm gonna open this up because I think this is some of the least appealing in terms of the sketches. Some of the other ones, like these guys here, like there's less midtones, and usually when there's a midtone or just floating strokes that aren't part of like a graphic design facilitating, like pushing things towards a narrative, like that's when things get muddy. You can see here, like there's no nonsense painting getting in the way of just a strong graphic design and elegant drawing strokes or calligraphy. But as we get this stuff, you can see how like just the tonal stuff just sort of distracts from the overall statement. And I love like you'll keep improving, but I love that you're trying to get different wrinkles and different folds on all the different variations that you're doing. I think I'll draw over this guy. With his hands in his pockets, I almost feel like we could get more tension in it. So like you're having more straights here, less billowy stuff. And then all the billowy stuff sort of falls through the weight of the pants. Oh, I didn't, Aiden saying that these things are 5 years old. Well, crap. Well, hopefully this is still valuable because I'm sure you would make some great improvements having revisiting them. Here, I just want to show an example of getting rid of midtones, sort of cleans up and makes a sketch a little bit more appealing when you just get rid of like anything that's unnecessary. And for the rendering stuff, like just if you're able to like stick to soft edges for core shadows and relatively sharp edges for everything else, for the most part, like things start to just it's easier to control um, an appealing quick sketch rather than like having sort of looseness sort of haphazardly everywhere. If you're just firm about where you're placing a soft and a sharp, and then let happy accidents happen in between that. That's great. I think I'll just because there's more to work with here, just for the sake of the stream, I'll just work on this guy a little bit. We talked about earlier about like how do we balance the villainous quality with the heroic quality, and like can the villainous part come through performance? Right now I'm trying to give more dynamic shapes because like this is sort of just like a balloon shape, but also more padding for the eyes to be important. So I want to make any of this area in the chest a little less important. So I'm just making it part of the same field of dark blue. Take this value. And this is where you like you get muddied and like what is the actual value of the code itself. So like first I want to have my base be the dominant proportion. And then again, like what's your large, medium, and small, or dominant, subdominant, subordinate value structure based on that. That's going to help with the tone of the character narratively, but also just describing the actual volumes through sculptural rendering. And here, he's sort of got a ripped up shirt, and that seems like it'd be cool. Like, does he have some sort of power that would happen with, or is that just like an old tattered favorite shirt? But like in the context of this being an action hero, it makes me think that like that's wear and tear from fighting. So again, like, how do we make that statement more clear? A little bit too bright, but I want to add a pepper in that value somewhere, so maybe just like a sliver of that. Mostly working with trying to adjust vertical linear statements with the more boxy, like stronger silhouette statements. So like anything that's sort of form fitting, I want to use as like a linear element that's going to add some quick motion. Using sort of a middle seam line to add more movement upward. And this is me just using comic book inking to infer the sculptural nature of the wrinkles. And those like in letting that do most of the heavy lifting, like not like feel like I need to draw everything, but like how can I like hit the quick read from afar? That's gonna do most of what I need. One thing I liked is some of the horizontal ones, so I think I do want them to go across, but I don't want to. I don't want them to be thick across. So we're getting from like a taper, like a thick to thin. Because as it transitions to the silhouette edge, I don't want a strong piece of visual weight here. And maybe they can do that through a mid-tone or through rendering and subtler values. But right now I just want the interior section. So like sort of like this family of rhythms which point towards the eye or the head. So like we're going from the swift anatomy here to the edge. This now having more visual weight because of this value blocking, and we're sort of flowing towards the eye, or the head, rather. And the boots right now, they're not really saying what they're for. Like, do they have rocket thrusters, but right now they still feel like they're part of like an overall heavier armor set, like in Fallout or something. So like I'm not getting sense of whether it is a rocket boost or like is it helping him do something, and I'm not sure what that would be. But like but does it? And if it's not either of those things, why would it be such heavy protection just on his feet? Um, but I feel like it'd be kind of cool to have like these stronger, thicker armored boots for like swifter movements. I'm bringing this up so that from the back view, we could have some thrusters on the bottom of the calf. And this is a first read. Like I think if I was to go in there and actually really design the boot, I'd find like what a really cool graphic could be for that statement. Try out many different combinations of the glow and how that marries to like the metal and engineering. Every time I add a new form, I'm just trying to like turn a little tiny box in space and then like round out the corners, like because I want it to be like a little bit friendlier, like um, but also have like the strength of the bold shapes it already had. Like one big sort of knee brace strap. So it's like something substantial that's going to really connect that thing together. And then maybe even something that has some structural portion that helps pivot at the knee, so it doesn't feel like it's just a sagging thing straight dangling from his shin area. Well, I mean, if it's a game or a show, like the function would like we need to know like how it's accenting his animation, like what he's doing. But yes, they are cool in general. I'm always weary of ribbing patterns, like whether it's like let's say you have a gauntlet and like a lot of people's inclination is to like just segment things down the middle. So like knowing that's the case and knowing that's another hallmark of like quote unquote concept art, that's when you just start playing with proportion. Like how do you create variety and create movement through just arranging things a little bit differently? So like here's the same amount of segmentation, like that alone adds movement. Um, or let's say you have three shapes. What if one's a little bit different? So let's do the same exact thing, but now we're changing it, and that gives us a little bit more movement because of how we reoriented that shape. Rather than letting that line continue, it sort of takes a right angle. So that's just to say, like, catch yourself when you're doing things mindlessly or you're just laying in details for the sake of detailing. like I could take this same proportion and bring it down here, but it's gonna stop the movement of the style and the coolness of the style, which is inferred depth and movement. So what I want is a smaller version of that same thing. And that's not even the best version, right? Like we can do 20 little iterations on what that could be or should be, or it doesn't stop that way. We do something that's more angled vertically if we want a little glowy bit. And like, how do we feel about that? It's just say like, try to like create the habit of being more thoughtful when you catch yourself um, having a lot of repetition that's not saying one thing or another. Feel like those dots are like usually like maybe I'd have something like that around the back where the thrusters are for heat exhaust. Like maybe that's where that would come in handy. And then maybe in the front, I'd have something that's a more substantial and protective. So you get like a fatter circular thing. But even then, like that's a trope of like anime designer that you'd see. So, for lack of a better word, trope. That's where I would want to have a more thoughtful statement. It's like either we're regurgitating things we've seen, or we're making a conscious decision to design something that's a hallmark to the project, or a hallmark to you as an artist. People are like, oh, he's the guy that like does things a little bit differently, a little bit more interesting. He's not just regurgitating impressions of what we all know to be. And again, even when I'm like sculpting like a tech thing like this, I'm thinking back to comic book inking, but also like part, like when people were designing concept with markers. So you do like the silhouette, and you would do the shadow of the silhouette, and then you come in with the lines to describe thinner lines to just Jesus describe the silhouette, and slightly thicker line to describe a shadow or a bevel, and then interior lines for cuts, slightly thicker, describe like more of an integration or some sort of lip within the material. But this is where you get away from like just nonsense painting, so that's getting in the way from like of actual thinking, the thinking process behind the design. And this is that limited value palette we were talking about. We're limiting our components to flat shape to describe light and shadow, so the lighting, but then light and dark to describe local color value. So that's those other keywords we've been trying to say is like limited value palette, local color values as it describes the graphic design. So like this deep black is describing some sort of dark material, whether it's like straps or rubber, blah, 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 on interior meshing that helps like adhere it to the body in the metal to it. And then the lighter value for the metal, and then the blue for the glowy bits, and then the black is also playing shadow. It's playing the little tiny sculptural pieces like this are in thicker lines, are inferred shadow on a smaller scale. And then we're just trying to keep our exterior line somewhat thin just to be the containing line for the drawing itself. But if I was doing something more realistic, I wouldn't even have a containing line. I would just let my value be the edge and just make sure that I'm controlling my edge relationships well enough to where there's clarity and I don't need to draw an outline. So I'm getting one step closer to my realistic final when doing a film design versus something more stylized like this. Let that black material flow directly into that cut of the metal. So a rhythm line between the two. So some sort of unity, especially something like this where like it needs to have a strong base and everything needs to be graphed onto that so it feels like structurally sound, since it's such a heavy duty element, like heavy duty, and it's like it's the strength of the material, but the weight of it as well. Shadow, line, shadow. And also, even getting into this, so like knowing where your light source is coming from, you need to be. This is why we found it so important to be able to move quickly and with a lot of dexterity, but create clarity. Is like know where the light source is, and then know where your thicks and thins go based off of that light source. So you're able to move fast and create depth in through your detail without having to necessarily render all that. Because like if you set your drawing up or you set your sculpture of your base design up, the rendering just falls into place because you're not needing to compensate for a bad drawing underneath. That's just to say, like here, you're not seeing around that corner here, so you're letting the shadow, the cast shadow, describe that edge, and then this is thicker, so we're getting a shadow on the under bevel of that inset area. I don't need to necessarily go in there and add a shadow value or add rendering here to describe the volume going down. Hopefully that graphic design of that shape is telling all the form it needs within that hard surface detailing. And then a lot of the drawings we end up doing over students or developing artists, younger artists, is it's a lot of this the fundamental shit. Like if we can just make a habit and like nip it in the bud, then you're well on your way, at least like making more decisions rather than like fixing just you describing a simple form in general. Yeah. You can see also I'm trying to use a little sliver, like sparing sliver of white to be the top plane. A little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit on this edge, but all the shadows are the dominant thing. So it's local color value shadow, and then the light highlight are just the accent or rim light to accent the 3D volume. Yeah. So again, I'm second stream. I'm gonna sort of thoughtfully try to figure out how I can um, create a good pacing for these streams, because it is a lot of floundering like it would be with class feedback. And I'll try to come in with like more strict bullet points that we're going to address going forward. It's easy to just get stuck on a few different images and not really holistically be beneficial. But I am trying to keep the stream like somewhat low maintenance, where like I don't want to put a lot of effort into this. I want to treat it like class, where we know what the goal is and we want to give feedback, and like how can we plus it within the time that we have for the feedback, like what can we do with that, and hopefully it'll get more entertaining and more informative and as we go. Yeah, it's hard to like because you can either focus on creating a beautiful image, or you could like sort of work you through the process. And I feel more confident that like it'd be beneficial for me to work through the process and hopefully like all those little nuggets sort of amount to something worthwhile. Because otherwise you're just kind of plowing through and trying to do a great drawing and not really describing things because you're having to move too quickly to describe all the behind the scenes thinking of what you're doing. So you're either doing a beautiful drawing or you're doing sort of a piecemeal breakdown of the process as you're going through. And this is generally how I work is as I'm moving through any of my designs. But that's my way of making myself feel better for why it's not cooler than it is within the allotted time. Why is it not better? What is wrong with you? Why did you decide to be the way you are? I don't know why I feel compelled to to apologize for not checking the chat. I just know that I can't do both. But I can't imagine that people don't care that much. I won't, yeah, I should figure out if there's a way to like get an audio ping if somebody has like a specific question or request for like when we're on a specific sketch over or subject. That would be handy. Usually I'll upres when I start detailing a face, I'll upres it so that it's like the height, the face is the height of my canvas or monitor pixel wise. So that as I'm getting in here, you don't get the anti-aliasing. Excuse my coughing. I want some sort of quirky thing about this. I don't know if it's like a little Deadpool or Green Goblin flopadoo on the top there. Just like just some sort of statement because it could also be like just it's the weight of it could be like that shirt on the second brother sketch. Like we could really describe the volume of the skull if it's a weighted material. It's pulling down, and it just comes back to the fit of the costume and how it's interacting with the solid mannequin of the body underneath. I want some vertical, like if this is a thinner shirt, I want to have like some stretching, asymmetrical, vertical wrinkles just add some visual interest, but again, motion upward through a different visual component because you've already got the thin sliver of lighter orange, and then compounding the visual interest towards the focal point. Cool. Yeah, just lots of little nuggets. Hopefully that was interesting and informative and helpful, like little things you can grab onto. I know that through my personal development, it was uh it was always those like one or two things. Like you take a class and they'd say one thing that would make the whole thing worthwhile. You go same thing with a workshop. Um, so and I feel like over the years that's sort of how I built up all these rules of thumb that are important and evocative and very useful to myself. So hopefully that's what this stream can be for anybody who needs a little bit of a leg up, is just communicating that stuff in one place. And thank you all for coming. So I apologize for not having found the rhythm because I know it can be boring. But I'll continue to apologize for it to be boring. Not that I ever want to be bombastic and obnoxious, but there's a version of this where you're droning too much. You're like, and then and that rhythm becomes like blow my brains out. Uh, but it's fun. I love, like, the cool thing about doing feedback for students is like you're doing such a wide variety of subjects and styles, and you get to play with all this art, and it only helps me improve, having to be more clear about this stuff, and also just the mileage you get from trying to improve something within a certain amount of time. Uh, but again, thank you all. I appreciate you guys coming. I'm gonna just glance over the chat before I skedoodle, and I'll make sure to put up my TV out frame today. Kaboop. And this is me rambling on a black screen as I look at the chat. Rat-a-tat-tat. What is in the chat? And thanks again, Aiden, um, for submitting. I really appreciate it. I appreciate it so much.